Well, thank you. I'm really excited to be presenting here. We seem to have a full house, so I'm glad you folks could join us. This is a topic I'm really passionate about. Marketing operations is really going through an evolution. These are still very early days. But really, before we get into best practices, I'd love to talk a little bit about, what's driving this focus towards marketing operations. It really starts with the customer. We're seeing this shift in the buying journey and how the buyers are taking control of the buying journey. And this is where marketing is starting to really influence the buying journey and influence engagement with the customer. And we're seeing this unprecedented change in buying, where we're moving from information scarcity to information abundance. The power is really with the buyer. And what's happening within the organization is that marketing has more power than ever before. They have more control than ever before. And this control is manifesting itself across the customer journey and also across the marketing funnel. So marketing has more control or more influence over the funnel than ever before. The other element to consider is the customer itself and the customer's journey. This customer is going across channels, is engaging with your content on your sites, on social media, on mobile devices, on email, on multiple devices. And this is a very complex journey that marketing needs to execute. So with this change in behavior of the customer and this focus towards the end-to-end customer journey and the complexity involved in the journey, the question really becomes, how do you make marketing happen, and who runs this machinery to ultimately drive results? And this is where we're seeing the rise of the marketing operations function. Organizations realize that the complexity in marketing has come to a point where you need to centralize capabilities, you need more skills than ever before. And this has really led to the rise of the marketing operations function. There's a lot of definitions out there just because it's such early days. It really behooves us to take a look at what really marketing operations is. Serious Decisions has a definition. It's a little complicated. But if you start to break it down, you start to ask yourself, well, what does marketing operations really do? And you start to break that down into elements. Well, it starts with the customer experience. They have to ensure the customer experience is optimized. They need to generate high-quality demand. They need to measure and deliver insights to the business. They have to manage data and ensure it's secure. They need to ensure marketing is meeting the expectations of the business. They need to ensure that security and data privacy is managed. They need to run programs and align them to business objectives. They need to ensure that the right people are working the right tasks within their groups and across all marketing, because they run the processes and quite often the programs. And ultimately, they're enabling marketing teams. They're providing capabilities and self-service to drive demand. So as you consider all these things that marketing operations does, it's a sort of hard work. And this just begins to scope out marketing operations. I haven't seen two teams who are working with the same scope. Every organization, based on their business objectives, internal culture, and needs, structures teams differently. But the scope can be quite vast. And it typically breaks down into planning, technology, process, and analytics. Across budgeting, planning programs, managing the marketing technology, having the governance processes to be successful, and providing insights into the business. In varying combinations of scope, typically marketing operations teams are given scope assignments across these four areas. But what I'm seeing when I engage with clients across the board and in different industries, that generally there's a lot of struggle and there's a lot of friction with the business in terms of what marketing operations delivers. And in terms of results, they're generally struggling. So where is that struggle coming from? The first place to look at is really the alignment within the organization. And that, by that I mean, is everything working together in symphony or not? And more often than not, I tend to see a lack of organization alignment. So I've seen groups where marketing operations as a function is given a bunch of technology to manage and some campaigns that, in terms of the scope of what they're supposed to do, it's not quite clear. The scope changes based on the new technology that's bought or the new type of program that needs to be run. There's no alignment between different teams, between sales, marketing operations, in terms of what marketing operations is supposed to do. So this lack of organization alignment is a key issue that impacts success. Typically, there's very little executive buy-in, where these teams are just considered to run the digital infrastructure, but they're doing so much more. So there's really, the executive alignment is not there, the buy-in's not there, internally processes are not defined, and the scope is not clear. And then the outcomes are not clear. So it's not clear in terms of what marketing operations teams are supposed to drive. And it's certainly not just managing the marketing infrastructure. It's not just keeping the site up, running campaigns, just managing your digital infrastructure. It's so much more than that. Marketing operations teams are driving outcomes, and they make marketing accountable to the business. However, within the business, they're quite often seen the teams that just keep the lights on. So the outcomes are not clear in terms of what they're supposed to drive towards. Rarely have I seen scorecards that link outcomes to incentives, for example, because quite often the scope is not clear, or it's considered to be menial than it actually is. Another issue that we quite often run into is that the insights are not there. So marketing operations teams have to enable the organization with insights on how is demand performing? Is there how are you engaging your customers? And if that insight is not delivered at scale, if you will, across the enterprise, really the function and the sustainability of the marketing operations team comes into question. And generally, they're overwhelmed. I'm not sure if you follow the Scott Brinker's graphic of the marketing technology landscape, but a few years ago, it was about 1,000 companies. This past year, I think it's grown to like 4,000, and I heard that there's still like 1,800 companies that they haven't tracked in here, and you really need some kind of a magnifying device to look at, what are the different technologies out there. Now, having to deal with something like this within an organization, several challenges start to come up, right? So what technology do we need? What's a good fit for us? Do we have the skills to manage the technology? Marketing organizations have a tendency to buy a lot of marketing technology with little thought towards how will it get operationalized, how will it fit into your ecosystem, how will the data flow. Everyone wants to buy marketing technology because it's a nice shiny car, and whenever there's a new trend, a few years ago it was social media, so everyone was buying social media platforms, and it was data, now it's predictive analytics, account-based marketing. So everyone's, there's this arms race to buy marketing technology with little thought towards how does it get operationalized. So what happens is marketing operations teams have to run the stuff, and it becomes quite overwhelming. And that's one of the reasons why they struggle. And finally, an area of concern, if you will, is around really a lack of skills. I find that organizations struggle to really understand what type of skills are needed to run the marketing operations function. And by that, I mean, if you think about the marketing technology stack that you folks maintain at each one of your organizations, of all the people that are on this webinar, I mean, the stack is pretty vast, and if you start to map that to the skills that you have internally, there's generally a big gap. I've seen gaps around analytics, data management, campaign management, program management. So there's generally a lack of skill availability, if you will, within marketing operations team. And some of it is a good reason. A lot of this is new. Organizations really try to still get a grip of what agile marketing is. How do you run those programs? So the skills aren't there in the marketplace. So there needs to be a focus towards training, but generally the lack of skills have a significant impact on the success of marketing operations. So with all that struggle, what happens? What does that result into? And ultimately, that result, it goes all the way out to your customer, right? So once you're not able to deliver experiences which are engaging, relevant, you're delivering irrelevant messages because marketing is not working in symphony, and marketing operations is quite often driving that. You don't have the data to really understand what your customers want, which are the different segments consuming different types of information. So, there's a tendency to go back to one-size-fits-all type marketing, and that leads to disengagement. So ultimately, the impact of all of this is on the customer in how they consume information, how they engage with your brand, and ultimately then when that starts to happen, everyone wakes up and everyone gets upset. So how do we do what this guy is telling us to do? So how do we make marketing and marketing operations great again, right? So how do we fix the issues which are out there? Quite often, there's simple problems that can be solved, but I find generally the 8 best practices to consider. Now, every organization is unique, and there's no one-size-fits-all model that can be applied, but there are 8 key areas that I ask my clients to consider in terms of the trends that I've seen. And the first is, before getting into technology, hiring more people, you need to align your organization. And when you start to align the organization, the first area to consider is what are the outcomes that marketing operations teams have to drive. And keeping the lights on is not a business objective. You need to really be clear on the outcomes that marketing operations teams drive to really ensure that your organization is aligned. If your outcomes are aligned, measurement is clear, then you're going to start to move in the right direction. And while it starts with outcome, there's so much more. You need to think about executive buy-in. Is there an executive sponsor, very specifically, who is part of the executive steering committee around the marketing operations team? If there's authority given, then you will get accountability. So by that I mean, does the marketing operations team control program management, control campaigns? If you just give them the infrastructure to manage and run some campaigns, they won't have the accountability to drive the outcome. So the authority around program management is really, really important. And I think the right incentives have to be in place. So I've seen some of my clients have incentives around sales accepted leads, incentives around revenue. So those are the right type of incentives to drive the right type of outcomes. If you have the right incentives, you'll get the right behavior, if you will. So organization alignment and setting the right goals, getting the right people involved is so important. But another area to consider is really to take a step back and ask yourselves, what is the scope of the marketing operations team? It's really amazing. I've had discussions with clients where we started by, talking with the executives and with the marketing operations scope, and I get different answers in terms of what is scope. So you need to take this time to figure out scope for the organization. I haven't really found an organization where I can give you a template. There's a list of things to consider, a template that I quite often give to my clients, but one size does not fit all. Like, every organization is different. So you really have to ask yourselves, what's really in scope and what's not? What is the marketing operations team? So running campaigns is quite often an area that marketing operations teams support, maybe on a global basis, on a local basis. They run the digital infrastructure. They manage governance. Governance is really important. Again, they won't have the authority unless they own governance of the functions. And one of the most important areas is the analytics and the insights. So they need to deliver insights to the organization. If they're running the digital infrastructure, they're running the campaigns, and the analytics and the insights are going to be with them. So taking this time up front to align the organization will set you up for success. The other area to think about and how things get managed is really running the digital infrastructure. A lot has changed over the last few years with the with the focus towards the cloud and organizations moving from on-premise to the cloud, and that's just a lot of things have just begun, if you will. We think a lot's happened, but I think it's just the beginning of this movement towards the cloud, and understanding how the cloud can impact your digital infrastructure is really important. So you need skills in-house or skills available to you around the cloud infrastructure. In today's day and age, unless you have solid skills around the cloud, you struggle, because it's not just about deploying your running Salesforce or Eloqua or Marketo. It's also running your website on the cloud, because you want to scale it for different reasons. And many of these internal applications are going to move to the cloud. So having a cloud strategy and the right skills is important. Data management, there are all kinds of issues that start to show up when it comes to data, and especially with the cloud. And having the right monitoring systems in place to be able to run your digital infrastructure at scale. So once you're running your digital infrastructure in scale, then you need to enable the organization with the right type of insights. And by that I mean, it's just not about the vanity metrics. It's not about how many hits did your campaign get, how many open rates did you get. So that's the type of stuff that really is not of interest to the business or different marketing teams. They really want to know what's going on with our customer. Do we have a full view of our customer? So one of the things that I encourage marketing operations teams to consider is bring that single view of the customer together, because once you provide that insight back to the business, it's really powerful. Once you have the single view of the customer, then you can start to ask yourself, well, how do we measure engagement? What does that look like? What is a lead which is cold, hot, and what kind of metrics can we consider beyond just the vanity metrics, right? What does engagement look like in terms of our users? So once you have the right data, you start to measure engagement and the right type of things, and you can start to develop, for example, some sort of a scoring model, if you will, and then that starts to get the right information in the hands of your business development team. So getting not just the insights, what you don't want to send is, well, here's how many hits our website got, here's how many email opens we got. You really want to help them understand how you're moving the needle when it comes to ultimately the outcomes that matter. If you've been gold on the right things, it's revenue, it's sales accepted leads, marketing qualified leads, all that type of stuff. And once you get that insight into the hands of the business, the conversation starts to change, and the marketing operations team starts to get the right type of alignment with the organization. So once you have the right insights, you can start to then think about, well, what kind of governance do we need to enable marketing? One of the key functions that quite often I feel organizations skip, and that introduces an enormous amount of risk, is not having a content governance plan. I think this is fundamental to any organization. I can't think of any organization today that does not require a content governance plan, but in my opinion, maybe 5–10% actually document it, and those who do start to document this after being exposed to significant risk, content being lost, access by some ex-employee, that type of stuff starts to happen, and then people wake up and start to create the content governance plan. But to enable marketing, a content governance plan is important. It starts to lay out who can access content, how the content gets published, unpublished, where the content is stored. And once you start to create the content governance plan, that brings alignment because the content governance plan really captures the workflow of how the content flows within the organization. Aside from the content governance plan, you need to really have a security framework in place. So you need to start to establish how secure your digital infrastructure needs to be. So as you start to buy cloud platforms and you start to deploy information, you'll start to have all your customer data appear in these cloud platforms. So what type of security do you need when personally identifiable information is on the cloud? What kind of a framework do you need in place also internally for your marketing teams to actually access the secure information? Beyond that, you need guidelines to establish how does your brand need to be positioned online. So as you start to give the marketing operations, what they really do is they give control back to marketing and to the business, and that's where the governance comes to the fore, and that's where you need to have digital experience guidelines. So what does the web page need to look like? Can you change the logo of the organization? What kind of content can we position? What kind of templates do we need to work within? So all of that needs to be captured for you folks to be able to enable the business to run campaigns and manage the digital experience. Internally, you need the right operating structure in terms of your teams, and that is part of governance as well. How are you structured to enable marketing and enable the business to be successful? And this is where you can think about the many different models in terms of centralized, decentralized, but having some kind of an operating structure is really important. And then marketing operations teams need to ultimately generate demand, but not only just generate demand, because you could generate demand by essentially letting marketing teams run off on their own and do whatever they want. You need to do it at scale with governance in mind. And that's the difference that a centralized or a marketing operations team would bring to the business, is that they would generate demand at scale in a predictable and consistent manner. So that involves setting up the demand generation infrastructure, capturing the demand generation playbook, if you will, so which captures how campaigns are run, what are the processes and approvals we need to go through, what type of reports will be delivered after every campaign, and who are the resources involved. And that quite often also leads into this whole notion of a demand center, if you will, that allows the organization to respond to really what's happening is there's this scale required with digital now. It's not just about digital marketing, we're marketing in a digital world. And then in this digital world, just the type of skills required are so diversified that it's very difficult to be decentralized completely with marketing. So you need to bring a set of skills together. And a demand center is that response to be able to respond to this need of having multiple skills and diversified skills to be successful. And quite often, in the core of this demand center is a marketing automation platform that allows you to deliver content and the volume that most organizations need, different types of content at scale. So thinking about what kind of a demand center you need is quite often where a marketing operations team would actually start to think about how they're structured and allow them to generate demand at scale. Critical things that marketing operations team need to think about is they're actually giving control back to the business. So setting up a marketing operations team does not mean that you're running things for the business and now all the work is being done by you folks. It is a lot of hard work, but what you're really doing is enabling the business. So how do you do that? A lot of it is self-service. You need to ensure that your digital infrastructure is set up in a way that is self-service. So for example, your content management system. Content editors across the business within marketing should be able to go in, they should be easy to use, and they should be able to essentially deliver experiences that matter. When it comes to campaigns, again, self-service. When it comes to insights, again, it should be self-service. There should be dashboards available and analytics available for different parts of the business. Executives may want simple dashboards, which are not complicated, versus sophisticated marketers who would want, more detailed insights, if you will. But the focus needs to be on simplicity. I quite often tell my clients that if the marketer's experience breaks, the customer experience breaks. And it's really important to keep the marketer's experience as simple as possible. We talk about simplicity and ease of use for the customers. No different for the marketing team because they're using these systems. It's got to be simple. It's got to be easy. And that's got to be core to how you select these platforms and deploy them. Quite often, I see this tendency towards picking these, great platforms which have all these bells and whistles, and then you give this fighter jet to a marketer who's never flown one, and they crash and burn. All they want to do is get from point A to point B. They need a Toyota that can take them from point A to point B. It's simple to use. They're not going to be able to fly the fighter plane. So thinking about simplicity is important. And again, going back to governance when it comes to self-service, you need governance as your friend to enable self-service. And self-service is where I've seen some organizations measure the effectiveness of self-service, and they have analytics for the marketers to achieve whether they're using the system to see how effective they are, how effective the marketing operations teams are to really enable marketing teams. So it's really interesting in that you're setting up, you're setting up this platform and you're running this orchestra, if you will, and you're allowing people to run digital marketing through the infrastructure that you lay out. And it's a beautiful thing when it comes together, but when it doesn't, your teams get blamed quite a bit. So focused on campaign management and content management to begin with, because those are two systems that get used quite a bit. And then analytics. So if you can provide self-service analytics, executive dashboards down to, if you've got Google, Adobe, and other Sitecore analytics, allowing users to go in, get the reports they want, or deliver reports to them, you're going to start to get a lot of friends within the organization. So enabling self-service is important, and it's a best practice. So I encourage my clients to think about metrics around self-service, and that quite often links to efficiency. It leads to time to market. So, and once you start to see that, you start to get really a lot of good alignment with the different parts of the business. And beyond that, you need to think about having a roadmap. So the challenge that you face is this explosion of marketing technology. That's one. Two, it's around your customer and the new channels that they're engaging with. Ultimately, the customer will drive you towards delivering content in those channels because the customer is in control. And internally, just not having all the skills at once, big bang doesn't work. So you need to put together some kind of a marketing technology roadmap. I've put out a bunch of blogs around how to do this. I won't get into that here, but having a roadmap, any roadmap is important. And I encourage my clients to get together as a team and simply just start with your objectives, right? So what are the marketing objectives? What are the business objectives? And starting with that and then laying out what type of programs do we need to run to accomplish those business objectives. And then think about how the digital infrastructure needs to come into place. What are the gaps with that infrastructure to make that happen? And you start to then build this view around your programs. But that's not enough. I encourage them to start those meetings as they've created the programs and if they've laid out their roadmaps, to start those meetings by looking at what's happened. So start with looking at your data to see the programs that you're rolling out, the content that you're delivering to your clients, is that really moving the needle? Or, you want to do more of less rather than the other way around. So once you start to see the data allows you to make better decisions around your roadmap. So start those meetings by looking at your data and then start to ask yourself the business objectives and then start to optimize that roadmap. And I recommend to my clients that once a quarter, they should definitely have some kind of a review meeting to look at the data, to look at their roadmaps and see if they need to be optimized. Those roadmaps should not be set in stone, but they should be iterative, and as agile teams, you should think about changing them. But having a roadmap, something visual that links your business priorities with your programs and technology in just this one beautiful slide allows you to really engage the organization internally. And then you can consider your roadmaps. You can think about where you are. This slide is slightly complicated, but really it's like think about the stage you are in and think about all the things that you can do and how you would structure that. So without going through all the stuff, you can think about how you set up, how you manage your infrastructure, how do you operate it, how do you generate demand, and then how do you optimize campaigns. And there's all these things you can do, but you can just pick things based on where you are in your maturity model. So one aspect of it is, what does the business want? The other aspect is, well, how do we link that to just improving the maturity of our marketing team? No matter what the business wants, you want to get to a point where you're optimizing your experiences, right? You're giving better experiences to your customers. I mean, that's just a no-brainer. So how do you get there? And you can't get there right at the beginning. You can't do personalization, when your digital infrastructure is not set up. So you need to take the time to think about where you are and where you need to get to in terms of your maturity model, and build that into your roadmap, right? So roadmap should not just be a bunch of business priorities linked with a whole bunch of projects. It should be about improving maturity as well. So optimization, personalization, those types of things can be built in to improve results. And then finally, I think the most important thing around marketing operations, the new function, there's a lot of new things, is around continuous improvement. And marketers don't want to hear about like Six Sigma and those types of things. But I found marketing operations teams that are successful, they continuously improve. So there's a lot of training internally, but also there's a capacity to test and fail. So you don't want to fail in delivering bad experiences to clients. I ask my marketing teams to, you don't want to test things and fail, on your corporate website, for example. But you can test and fail when it comes to a prototype, right? So prototyping is super important, I think, for marketing teams, and that's where you can really test out something, create a prototype, test it with a group. You can test with a very small segment, or share within the organization, or with a group of customers if you have a customer advisory board. That'll allow you to really look at things, deploy them. Just because what you're going to struggle with is that you're not going to hear a lot of like maturity models, best practices that you can just follow, because all of this is new and teams are being, there's no real, this function, the marketing operation function, I think in the last 10 years people started to write about it, but it's really starting to mature now. So you should use that as an opportunity to test and learn as much as you can by prototyping and allowing organizations to test new products and technology. And think about improving some kind of improvement processes. So one of the things I recommend to our clients if they're doing agile marketing, so if you run a program, do some kind of review at the end of the project and see what type of improvements can we bring in, right? If you do some kind of a retrospective, whether it's at the end of a program, at the end of the quarter, you'll automatically start to bring in that thinking. But the retrospective will come and you're having some level of measurement. You're just better equipped to make decisions, and there's no bias. So if you're measuring the KPIs that are important and you're just meeting and actually looking at that data and reviewing it, you start to build this notion of, doing something, ensuring that it's meeting objectives and then iterating. So after every program, I'd encourage you to spend time and just doing a review, looking at the data to see what can improve, and then going back to your processes and making those improvements and seeing if those improvements work or not. I've seen organizations actually deploy Six Sigma processes within marketing, and I've seen great results. But one of the challenges with Six Sigma that you've got to think about is, shouldn't take the innovation away and trying to just optimize processes to the point that, it's all about efficiency. So marketing, I think, is all about innovation. It's all about doing new things. So you don't want to lose that. But think about continuous improvement, because there will be challenges. You will get technology that doesn't work. You will make mistakes. So that's just the nature of the beast, so to speak. So building in some kind of a process to improve process and improve how you work, and actually being committed to that process, because you'll want to do your campaign and move on to the next campaign and so on. But having a process to meet, review, and actually document what could be improved, and then going back to your processes will really make a big difference. So bringing it all together, a marketing operations team needs to run the digital infrastructure. They need to provide governance. You need to provide analytics, and you need to grow. So within those 4 areas, you need to build your model to deliver results. One of the areas you don't want to get stuck in is just running the digital infrastructure without doing anything else, because then you just get all the pain and you have no authority to make decisions. So you're kind of stuck in taking all the blame and not being able to drive results because you don't have the authority. So having governance and insights and the ability to impact growth and revenue, building that into your marketing operations model will really will make you successful. So with that, I'll pause and see if there are any questions. And as the questions are coming through, I'll just summarize and say that consider those best practices, and there's very little out there in terms of a methodology or an approach. Folks are just figuring this out as we go along. So a lot of it is starting within the organization and being clear of scope, being clear of aligning the organization. I think that's 70% of the battle. And once those battles are let's not call it a battle, let's call them negotiations, are managed, I think it becomes a lot easier after that. Having SLAs and those type of things within your governance enables that alignment. So the alignment is key, and once you have alignment, then working towards providing self-service to the business, providing insights that actually matter. They're not just vanity metrics, if you will. Providing the right governance to actually support the scale. Thinking about all the skills you would need and how would you be structured internally, whether it's centralized, decentralized, and so on. So those type of best practices, if you start to apply them, hopefully you'll find success. Are there any questions that have come through?
Yeah, thank you so much for that insight, Rahul. Yes, we do have questions. The first question is, how do you establish alignment between sales and marketing?
Yeah, one of my favorite topics. We all feel that pain, and I always say it's a dilemma. I don't think anyone's gotten it really right, but there's a few things that you can do, right? So one, the alignment, quite often, the breakdowns happen in terms of a definition of, for example, a lead. That's the one piece of data point that gets passed from marketing to sales and hopefully back to marketing if the leads are closing. So what is a definition of a lead, right? So what is a lead? You need to start with that. So define what a lead is, and then at what score, if you will, should it get passed to sales. What you don't want to do is pass a whole bunch of junk, right? But then hold sales accountable, right? So just because you're passing leads over doesn't mean that you stop there. You need to have SLAs with them in terms of when they'll act on leads. how quickly they'll go after those leads. And if those leads don't progress, then how do they come back into marketing so you can nurture them? So I think SLAs are quite important. Number two, I think marketing operations, marketing teams are not giving the right insights to sales. So we think about lead scoring, we think about that entire customer journey. How do you digitize? How do you capture the digital experience and actually simplify it and then hand it to the sales team through your CRM? I think that those insights are really important. So once the data is there and there's alignment in terms of how just, what are the rules of engagement between sales and marketing, that's like 80–90% of the challenge. And then you just have to generate demand over time. You need to deliver results that hopefully you've agreed to. But getting the alignment in place, having the insight, in my opinion, it's 80% of the battle. Next question.
Yeah. Next question is, how do traffic management and project management functions fit into marketing operations?
Okay. So what I've understood the question is, how does project management fit into essentially management of programs fit into marketing? I suppose that's the question. So I think project management is not just an IT capability. I think project management and program management, if you will, are so important when it comes to marketing operations functions, because ultimately you're running programs, running campaigns, you're running programs, and if you don't have a playbook of how a campaign should run, there's no project plan, then you're doomed to fail because you don't know when what needs to get delivered and who needs to do what. So I think program management as a function needs to exist within marketing operations. And I think the struggle is that marketers by trade are not trained on project management. So that's not something that they do day in, day out. But however, they are working within programs, they're running projects. So program management as a function should exist in marketing operations, because without having just a playbook on how projects are run, how a campaign is run, what are the different activities that need to get done, then it's just a free-for-all, So program management is a key competency within marketing operations, within governance, to allow you to be successful. Next question.
Next question is, what type of governance models are needed to manage digital assets?
What type of governance models are needed to manage? So I think the content governance plan is super important. So I would take the time to actually document, take any template, there's a ton of templates out there, just take the time to write out your content governance plan, right? So that includes the workflow. So how is content approved? What is the life cycle of the content? How is it approved? How does it make it up to your website? How does it get approved for email marketing? So what is that the governance process, if you will, or the workflow, if you will, to deliver content? Who can do what? So who can update pages on the website? Who can update? Can everyone publish? How do you control that? Who should be allowed to do what is quite important. And then capturing how content is actually created and how does it match your content guidelines is part of the content governance plan. So those are some basic things. There's a lot of other things, but I think a content governance plan is a great place to start. Other than that, you need to, we live in a world where, getting hacked is not a big deal anymore. So there's vulnerabilities everywhere. And now that you're so tightly connected to cloud systems, etc., it just adds to that, I guess. So security is really important. So documenting your security framework in terms of, how, for example, when an application is rolled out, what type of security test should they go through? So, denial of service attacks, There's just a whole bunch of other password hacking. There's just a bunch of other stuff like SQL injection, etc. Technical stuff, but it needs to be captured in terms of what kind of tests that you're going to run for different types of assets, because without figuring out what security looks like for your organization, you're just exposing yourself. So there's a whole bunch of other stuff that can be found even on our website and other places, but those two are I would say the first two things when it comes to governance that you need to think about. Just how does content flow? How does security manage? The third would be around data and data management, but I would start with content and security. Any other questions?
Yes, Rahul, we have a lot of questions coming. The next question is, what type of team works better in your opinion? Centralized or decentralized?
Well, I think there's a lot of confusion around what centralized and decentralized means. So you need to centralize a function to be able to cater to the diverse needs that digital just has and your customers will demand. So you need, just think about all the things that a typical organization, right, should need. So you need analytic skills, you need content skills, you need experience skills, UX skills, if you will. You need social development skills. You need SEO. So when you start to count the skills you have, you cannot decentralize every single skill. So the strategy is, how do you centralize a bunch of capabilities, but then through self-service, decentralized marketing where campaigns can be run, centralized teams can be accessed to support campaigns being executed. But a combination of a central team having key skill sets and self-service enables organizations to deliver digital demand at scale. Next question.
Rahul. This is last question that we're going to take. How do you create a marketing technology?
Okay. How do you create a marketing technology team or a stack?
How do you create a marketing technology?
Stack. Okay. So the way you create a marketing technology stack, the right stack for you is that you need to start with you need to have a roadmap, right? So you need to think about what are your business objectives, what needs to get done, and you can when you start to roadmap, it's interesting, you start to take a look at what gaps might be in your ecosystem, and then you can start to think about how do you fulfill those gaps over a period of time, right? So when you start to think about your roadmap, then you start to ask yourselves, well, what are those gaps for us to meet our business objectives? And then you start to lay out some kind of a digital architecture, if you will. I encourage organizations to create a digital architecture as part of the roadmap to lay out how the customer experience across different channels, devices, and the types of experiences that organization is delivering is supported by the capabilities. So once you start to capture that, you start to identify capabilities in your stack. And there's some common capabilities that most B2B organizations need, but with the explosion of marketing technology, it's just fair game. There's just so much. The stacks I've seen have like doubled, if not tripled, just in the last 2 or 3 years. So there's some core capabilities around content management, social media, analytics, CRM, content management, marketing automation. But then just so much new stuff has come around video platforms. Then there is around predictive scoring models, third-party data access and data management platforms. So it's exploding. But if you start with the objectives, think about creating a roadmap. You start to ask the right questions to sort of capture the digital architecture that you can then review over time, and that's how you can manage your stack. Any further questions? Or shall we wrap it up?
Rahul, we do have questions, but we'll have to take them a little later.
Okay, great. I'll get back to you. I really appreciate you taking the time to attend this webinar. Hopefully you found it informative. if you have any further questions, my name is Rahul Khosla, and feel free to reach out to me through our website or connect with me on LinkedIn, and be happy to answer any questions you may have. Again, I'm really passionate about this whole area. There's just so much going on, and I really feel that marketing operations actually drives marketing and delivers results. And this is just the beginning of some amazing things that we're going to see. We're going to start to see technologies and products just to enable marketing operations teams. So we live in a very exciting times, just the beginning of great things to come. So good luck, and I really appreciate you taking the time to attend the webinar. Hopefully it was
Thanks, Rahul.
informative. Take care and have a great day. Bye now.